Welcome to today's episode of the AI Trailblazer podcast. Today we have a very exciting guest. He is none other than Dustin from Revcast. So, for those of you who are just joining the podcast, we are Convert Inbox and we partner with B2B software companies to grow their business and revenue. So, if you own a B2B software company and you are interested in a free growth consultation, just drop us the word growth in the DMs below. So, without further ado, it's great to have you here, Dustin. So, could you start off with a bit about yourself? What's your background and what led you to start Revcast or join it as a CEO?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me on, Bruce. My background is a little varied, maybe not traditional. I started off as a software engineer, and I spent about 5 years in labs building software, building um, large scale enterprise systems. And through that, I transitioned actually from that software role into a customer facing role, into a sort of an engineering role with customers. And then over time, I've just gone through it and been fortunate enough to lead every part of a revenue organization, from the pre-sales, the sales, post-sales, and support and service. And I think it's given me a unique perspective on how revenue organizations work, what's hard to get right in a revenue organization, and what we need to fix.
Okay, got it. So you sort of came from a very diverse background, starting off with com science but transitioning into more of a customer facing role. So what would you say is the main problem that Revcast is trying to solve, and then in particular any target audience that you are really trying to help?
Yeah, I mean, the problem that we're trying to solve really became very apparent to me um, in the years after COVID. Really, in the years after COVID, when all of the team, all basically any SaaS company was pulling back. Right? There were layoffs throughout the industry, and many companies were trying to right size to become more efficient. And the company that I was at in a go to market leadership role was in the same spot. We had to reduce our go to market team by around 20%, which was significant. And I remember, all of that happened on a Monday, and our weekly forecast calls started on Tuesdays. And we were going through that forecast call, and our forecast had actually increased. It had gotten better week over week, even though we just let go of 20% of our staff. And I knew that that was not correct, right? There's no way that that could be correct. But the issue that happens today with most go to market orgs is that what we call a sales forecast is really just a deal forecast, right? We're really just looking at deals in the CRM, and we get some projections from whatever forecasting tool we're using, right? And then we apply some human subjectivity to it to come up with a number. It These systems fundamentally don't contemplate people and the capacity and the performance of people in your organization. And so I saw a big opportunity to help companies get much better at sales forecasting by addressing the whole people side of the forecast. And that's what we're focused on at Revcast.
Okay, interesting backstory to what made you want to start Revcast. So, could you also share now a bit about what is your role and how does it fit into the bigger picture at Revcast as well?
Yeah, so I'm the CEO of Revcast. So the bigger picture is, at the stage that we're at, I largely focus on our go to market activity. Being just being a founder led sales motion at this point. And we primarily work with revenue leaders, right? Because revenue leaders are the ones that really need as much precision as they can get with their forecast for multiple reasons. One is they're they're making a commitment to the other C-level executives, and in many cases the board, right? So there's that whole commitment and trust angle. But more importantly, the more precise you are with the forecast and the more confident you are that you're precise with your forecast, the better mid to long term decisions you can make, right? You can get out of that rut of always being trapped in the quarter and always managing to the quarter, and actually make longer term strategic decisions. You can make investments with confidence because within a reasonable percentage where the business is going to be, both in the current quarter and in future quarters out.
Right. So this sort of relates to your point earlier about bringing out more of the human potential in terms of forecasting sales. So could you just share an example to sort of paint a better picture of what sort of transformation would it give to these organizations if they could better predict, for example, how humans might be able to do in their sales performance?
Yeah, I mean, so with us, it all started with us with this notion of being able to build your sales plan, and capturing your sales plan in our system. And that's important. And I'll elaborate more on that, but that's really an important foundational point. So we get that plan that's usually in a spreadsheet, out of a spreadsheet and into our system. And that plan says, okay, here, quarter by quarter, year over year, here are the targets for each of my teams. This is the roll up target for the company. These are all the people that are responsible for driving to that target across my go to market org. And here are the performance assumptions that I have, for people. Here are the quotas. Here are the ramp schedules. Here's what I think about quota attainment against the goal. And so we're capturing all of those expectations. We're capturing your hiring plan. We're capturing your attrition assumptions. And then, since we know about every single person, we're able to paint an ongoing picture of performance at the individual level, all the way up to the company level of, hey, this is performance against plan. This is performance against your assumptions, which really gives us the ability, because again, being at the individual level, I can then do an individual level rep forecast and roll that up to every single level of the org, right? So I can give you a more precise view of where you're likely to land based on current and past performance, right? Against your expectations.
Okay, that makes sense better now. So let's talk a bit about the goals of the company. Let's say within the next 6 to 12 months, where would you want Revcast to be?
Yeah, I mean, for us right now, it's about finding, the right partners, and we have some great early customers that have been really good partners, and we're still looking to build to that. I mean, I always measure it in terms of, I know like everybody has revenue goals, right? I sell to people that obsess about revenue goals. I look at it as more of, do we have active customers? Are customers using our product every day, right? In some form or fashion, right? Are they getting data and insights from us every day? Are they using it to make business decisions? So, like where I want to be 6 months, 12 months from now, is I want every one of our customers to tell me that, hey, this has changed the way that we run our business, right? This is fundamentally something I will not get rid of, because it's changed the way I can make decisions. I can make better decisions faster with more confidence, because of Revcast. And that's what we hear from our early customers, which is always nice. I think now we have to keep scaling that.
Right. So what sort of metric would you track in this area to ensure that it's a success?
Yeah, largely, I mean, we have some metrics internally around usage and engagement, because usage doesn't always happen in our product, right? We send data out of our product into different systems. We send it into different like into Slack, for example. There's interaction in Slack, so we certainly measure engagement, and that's something that, from our product side, we watch closely. Um, I'm looking for, I think about this more of like, are we building like brand affinity? Are we building love for our brand and for what we do? So like my main measuring stick is, again, like the feedback, the qualitative feedback that I get from my customers as they're using our product. And, we're coming up and have gone through some of our first renewals. Obviously, I want 100% gross retention, right? Like that's something that, may over time be difficult, but right now I want 100% gross retention. And that's a metric that I look at, like, every month. How are we doing there? But I really index on the qualitative feedback right now, just because of the scale that we're at.
Got it. So what are the steps you are taking then to ensure that you are meeting the continued, customer retention?
Yeah, we work very closely with every one of our customers. So I think about it as a full life cycle. Um, from it's certainly it's about how we qualify at the top of the funnel and the type of companies that we really go after and think we are in a really good position to be able to help. But if I just look at it after sale, the first thing is we want to get you implemented and using our product within 2 days. And that is about like getting your revenue plan in, getting connected to some of your systems like your CRM, and making sure everything's clean and everything is what you would expect it to be data wise to get started. And then right now we have weekly check-ins with most of our customers, some bi-weekly, but we have very frequent check-ins. And our job in those check-ins isn't just to say, hey, like, how are things going? Good to see you again. Our job is to say, hey, how are you using Revcast today? Oh, and well, have you thought about using it
Mm.
this way? Have you started to use it in your weekly forecast calls? If not, let's talk about how you might be able to do that and the value that you and your team are going to get from it. So our job is to make sure that the use cases that we've seen produce value are being adopted in those weekly check-in calls that we have, right? Like that's the main thing. And we feel like if we can push the use cases and people adopt them, they will see value. And then, we get the stickiness that we want.
Got it. So, what would you say are some of the biggest challenges you are facing right now in getting your customers to see the value out of these use cases?
Well, it's a different paradigm, right? I mean, when we talk about sales forecasting, like I mentioned earlier, we're typically only talking about deal forecasting, right? Like we're looking at the deals in our CRM, we're judging the deals, and we're saying, okay, like how many of these do we think are going to close in a particular period? And then you zoom out and you say, okay, do we have enough deals overall, aka pipeline? Do we have enough pipeline overall to hit our targets? This is saying that, and that, by the way, is a very useful exercise. I'm not saying we should replace that, but it's incomplete. You can't build a sales forecast on that alone, not with real precision, which is why people's forecast moves 20 to 30%, throughout a 4-week period sometimes. um, so we're in part sort of exposing something that's always been there, right? So we got to get people to see that and to understand the implications of the approach. And then, of course, we have to prove that we're the right solution to fix that gap in their org.
Yeah, that makes sense. So, what would you say are is any other challenges right now that you face in terms of getting new customers?
Yeah, look, I think we all see some of this too because I see it posted on LinkedIn all the time. It's outbound is changing, I would say, in our current landscape. And the way that we've traditionally thought about outbound, which is just ramping up the volume, is not working. And I don't see that coming back anytime soon. So I think our challenge or the task in front of us is how do we create, how do we scale enough without it becoming impersonal and just a volume game, but kind of wisely use things like connections, intent signals, and all of the things that I think that lead to really good outreach. How do we most effectively use that to hit our target audience, which our ICP is really important to us.
Okay, I see. So, what would you say are the channels that's been working really well for Revcast in driving new user acquisition and what hasn't worked out as well as you expected?
Yeah, I mean, look, personal networks and referrals are always great. That gets you to a certain point, and I think that's where we started, like many companies. Now, what we see is leveraging, close or like second degree connections, if you will, and really, and through LinkedIn, frankly, sharing our perspectives on LinkedIn, targeting on LinkedIn has been helpful. I think it's getting a little bit more crowded and noisy, frankly. I am kind of worried about how long it stays useful. But email has not been working. I would say like cold email has not, been working for us. Warm targeted email, less email, better email. it has been our approach, and that's had some good uh, yield. And then finally, I would say, calling. Surprisingly, sales leaders pick up the phone. I think they want to hear pitches, right? They want to hear how other people are pitching and approaching these calls, and um, it's been interesting.
Okay, that's interesting. Yeah, maybe people prefer more personal touch in the age of AI and automated outbound technologies. So,
Yeah, I mean,
what
how
would you
many
say?
AI
Because we have
emails do you
touched, do I
today?
get
Yeah, how many AI
maybe a
emails do you
couple
get
a
a
week?
day? Yeah, I get a couple an hour.
Exactly. Yeah, exactly. That goes to your point that email is definitely getting more saturated, and that everyone, it's really easy to start nowadays as well. So it's harder to stand out in the inbox. So we've touched on a couple of topics at this point, Dustin, sort of from customer success to educational marketing and also like outbound. So what would you say is the biggest priority for Revcast right now that will drive the most impact or growth for the business, let's say for the next 6 to 12 months?
Yeah, I mean, we're in acquisition phase, like in terms of like customer acquisition phase, new customer acquisition phase. So, we talked a little bit about metrics earlier. My lagging metric is logos, right? Like I really, sure, we have revenue milestones that we're committed to hitting, but I think about this more in terms of logos. Like how many logos are we getting in what we believe is our ICP? And, you know, just that kind of momentum is the most important thing, because the best story that you can tell anyone is a story of success from other customers, and specifically like even better other customers that look like that prospect that you're talking to. So the more customers we have, the more we dig in and create value for them, the more stories we get, and it becomes a way to build momentum.
Yeah, absolutely. And that brings up an interesting point that you brought up earlier as well. Like you mentioned something about it, you find it hard to educate your prospects because they sort of have to reshift their paradigm, their perspective on what it means for sales forecasting. So, how has that impacted your sales cycle? And then, what are you trying to do to improve this aspect?
Yeah, it really hasn't had an impact. Well, it's hard for me to say. I don't sense that it has an impact on the sales cycle. What it has forced us to do is to constantly challenge ourselves and refine our ICP, because it's our ICP and our IB, like our ideal buyer profile too, right? And a company may have all of the right signals for us, but if that buyer doesn't have the right signals, it's probably not going to be a mix, right? Like we're looking for a certain type of buyer in a certain type of company at the stage that we're at. And I think that's the biggest impact it's had. It's, do we have someone that, you know, cliche kind of early adopter type profile that we believe is willing to push the needle. Like they're usually newer in a role, right? And
I see.
newer in a company, and they're willing to push the envelope a bit.
Like a champion for your product.
Yeah, and we can tell usually, like in the first conversation, right? Or do we have somebody that's going to push, or is this going to be like a longer, more involved cycle?
Interesting. So you see ideal customer profile and ideal buyer persona sort of a bit differently. Like, for example, a company might be your ICP, but then they might not have the right buyer persona. Is that what you are trying to say here?
Yeah, yeah, and in those cases, it's more about like, can we go find other people and rally a group together, right? To push a cycle through, which is obviously more complex, but I mean, works fine. Just typically takes longer and a little more um, organization. But if we find that champion, that person that's going to lean in, like we can go quick, and the time to value is quick.
Nice.
And the time to value becomes a big part of our sales cycle.
Okay, got it. So, sort of going into our last segment here, what sort of shifts are you seeing in the industry right now, and then how is that impacting the business or the growth?
Yeah, I it's interesting because I think we certainly went through a phase of um, just intense consolidation of platforms, and I think I think that was happening for all kind of tech within these SaaS companies that we target. But in particular, if you think about where you have the most software in a company, it's probably in sales, right? Because you have software from the individual rep level up to the company level, and it's doing all kinds of things. And so was this intense push to consolidate and remove, software basically from the business. I think we're past that now. I think I see people buying again. I see people, interested in exploring, especially with AI, interested in exploring, more and more tech. And so that's been good. That's been like a good shift that we've observed. I think in particular over the last 6 months, maybe. The other thing that's been interesting, I mean, we probably can't have a podcast without talking about AI, right? But in particular with AI, I see budget out there specifically allocated to buy AI solutions. And I see a certain expectation from many buyers is that kind of, for now at least, AI equals a chat interface. Um, and I don't know how long that will last. That's certainly a part of many AI solutions, but there's so much more. Like even in our product, they're under the scenes, probably unknown to most of our customers. There are tons and tons of agents that we've built that power most of what our product does. And then there's the tip of the iceberg, which is the natural language interface that just helps them interact and ask questions and get answers. But most of the true AI work is being done under the covers by an army of agents. And I'm just interested in how people's expectations around AI are going to evolve over time.
Okay, then what about for your own organization? Like, how has that impacted the way that people view or
Yeah.
expect AI when it comes to your product?
Yeah. I mean, I think for us, we found out that we needed to have that chat, that natural language extension of our product, right? It was just it was almost like table stakes expectation for many buyers. And there's definitely value in it because you can, of course, when you're talking about a mountain of data that you have in go to market, the ability to ask and get an answer quickly is something that would have probably taken, hours of an analyst's time, if not more time. And so that there's certainly value to that. And it also makes it easy for us to extend our product outside of the product, if that makes sense. Like you can just be in Slack and you want to ask a question. Well, great, we have a Slack app. You ask your question, you get an answer just as if you were in the product. So I think those things became expectations and something that we leaned into early on. And now I think for us it's just about how do we think about the different tasks that occur in a revenue organization and tackle those tasks with agents. Like it is kind of how we've approached this based on consumer expectations.
Okay, interesting. I like that it's very problem oriented, not just trying to give out like a fancy new AI solution that doesn't really solve any of your major pain points for the customer. So actually that is about it for the podcast interview, Dustin. Once again, thank you for jumping on the call and sharing these valuable insights with our audience. It's a pleasure to have you here.
Thank you, Bruce. Thanks for having me on.
Yeah, welcome. And if the audience wants to find out more about the company or reach out to you, what is the best way for them to do so?
Revcast.com or ping me on LinkedIn.
Okay, great. Again, thanks for coming on board today, Dustin.
Thanks.
Cheers.